From Wacko Chacko Studio, I am Ashwin Chacko, and this is The Fruitful Life, a show about the business of creativity and the stories behind the creators that have made their dreams a reality. Hey folks, welcome to The Fruitful Life. Don Clark, co-founder of Invisible Creatures. Hey Don.
Hey, how you doing?
Good. Thanks so much for taking the time to join us today. And to get us started, would you please introduce yourself to our audience? Tell us who you are and what you do.
Yeah, my pleasure. My name is Don Clark. I am a designer, illustrator, and I started Invisible Creature in 2006 with my brother. That was kind of a rebirth of a new company based on an old, which was called Asterisk Studio, that we started in 2000. So um, essentially doing the same thing for about 24 years now, under two different names. But yeah, that's the quick version.
Nice. So I'm looking forward to digging into your own story. But before we do, the first question I like to ask all my guests is if you could be a fruit, what fruit would it be and why?
Oh my gosh. A fruit, well, I'd probably be a fruit that couldn't be eaten, or would, is one of the last ones to be eaten. Um, yeah, I don't know. Like what's the name of that fruit that just smells horrific? One of those. So
Okay. Doraemon, I think it's called, right? The
okay,
sticky
yeah,
one.
I think that might be it. Yes, that's it.
All right. To get started, I'd love to hear a little bit of your background as a kid. You know, were you creative? Were you drawing all the time? What did that path look like? And what led you from that early childhood to where you are today?
Yeah, definitely drew as a kid. I was super into art. I think a lot of kids are, though. The one thing that we had in our family was my grandfather was an illustrator for NASA, and so
Oh, wow.
um, and he got paid to draw, spaceships and creatures and characters and all kinds of stuff. And he was multidisciplinary, meaning, he could work in different styles, and he did editorial illustrations for, his local newspaper and cartoons. And so um, he was a huge inspiration because it was proof positive that you could actually have a job, drawing. And so we really looked up to him. I got really into like baseball as a kid, and I thought I was going to be a ball player, and turned out I'd sucked. So I got back into art, and then found skateboarding culture, snowboarding, and just kind of that whole world, punk rock shortly after that, and then heavy metal, and just like got really into music. And so music for us was, when I say us, it's my brother and I. That was the segue into design. And we loved skateboard graphics, we loved album packaging, and it made the most sense for us when we started, really kind of pursuing not even a career, just like a hobby, essentially. Like, how can we be involved in our scene, other than playing music? It naturally it went to music. And so we started doing covers for our friends' bands, and going to the local like Kinko's, which I don't know if you know what Kinko's is, but it was a place here in the States where you could go like make copies of things, and using Xerox machines. We would go in and scan stuff at Kinko's, and late at night, and work on the 7-inch records for our friends' little hardcore bands. And that's really where it all started. So when we decided to start a company, we kind of had a built-in client base. We just had so many friends in the music industry, and in bands. And so, yeah, that was the inception really of like, how we got into this professionally. The conduit was all through music.
Wow. So, if we were to go back, you said you had a heavy metal band. Well, what was it called, and
Yeah, yeah.
what did you play?
So yeah, the we got into hardcore music. So that was in the mid 90s.
Yeah.
That was, hardcore is a mixture of essentially like metal and punk. And so we were into bands like Earth Crisis and Strife and Snapcase and yeah, a ton of different bands in that genre. And we started our own band. My brother started his band in 1995, hardcore band. I started one in 97, and we both were signed to a label called Tooth and Nail Records. So we both had two different bands, and then his original band broke up. He joined my band. We did that for a while, put out records. So in the year 2000, we started a band called Demon Hunter, which was more influenced by um, kind of newer American thrash bands like Machine Head and Fear Factory, and even Brazilian bands like Sepultura. Um, and that band was much more melodic and polished, and so the band still is in existence. It's a very popular band. I left about 15 years ago just to pursue, having a family and my company, obviously. And yeah, so the band's I get to root for Demon Hunter on the side now. It's been super cool. My brother's a prolific songwriter, extremely talented. So yeah, that's kind of the evolution of like our bands.
That's so cool. I'm curious
Yeah.
about like the transition there from, like being in a band, having that whole scene, doing a little bit of design on the side, then to deciding, okay, maybe I want to focus more on the design side of things. What kind of flipped the switch for you? What made you make that sort of transition?
I met a girl, and so I didn't want to. We got married a year later, and I didn't want to be on the road all the time and be
Right.
constantly. And so I really felt like, if I was going to pursue music as a profession full time, it would mean that I'm gone a lot. And we wanted to have kids, and so and my heart was really more in design at that point. And so that I really did, dove head first into that as my profession. And so yeah, that was kind of the the pivotal reason why, is really because we wanted to start a family. And now it's funny, now my daughter's almost 19 or almost 20, my son's almost 19, and I have another daughter that's 12. And so um I'm so glad that I was able to like kind of set aside that stuff to, be a dad that was around. So yeah.
Wow, that's super important. As a dad, I totally understand that
Yeah. Yeah.
push. Like it's the whole reason why I left full time work in
Yeah.
advertisement because at least the companies in India when I used to work there, they had no understanding of time and boundaries. So get
Wow.
calls at ten
Yeah,
o'clock
totally.
about like last minute client changes and stuff like that. And I'm like,
Yes.
I just have a
Yeah, dude.
newborn. you know, I have
Yeah.
different
Yeah, I
priorities.
totally, man. And the older you get, what I found is it just like your career is just it goes it's less and less of a priority as you realize how important your family is. So yeah, I mean, I really don't answer emails past 5 or 6 now at night, and I try to just really be present as much as possible.
Yeah. So, like, speaking of boundaries, what has that process been like for you? Like coming from a full music background, switching into design, and then creating boundaries within that as well, and trying to find a balance for yourself. What are some things or lessons that you learned along the way to create that balance?
Yeah, I think, if you're a creative, you're always going to be thinking about making stuff. You're always stoked on the next thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's something I don't think you can shut that off. And I don't think you necessarily should, I think that that's like what keeps us going and what keeps us motivated. I think for me, having, my wife and my kids, not, they're not designers. They just, all they do is they care about, in regards to how they see me, they just, I'm a husband and I'm a dad. And so putting it into perspective of who I am to them, which is the most important thing, you're able to just like I'm able to compartmentalize the two. At the same time, I've been lucky enough to really kind of weave my family story into my career. I mean, I've worked with so many clients that, are um, Lego and toy companies like that, the post office, and things that like my kids at the time growing up, were so into. And so like it's been super cool to like work on projects that they're like, my dad gets to work on this or gets to work on that. So um yeah, I feel like they're just a massive part of my success, in so many ways. So yeah, it's been cool.
So I want to jump back a little bit to you starting or joining Asterix, or did you co-start that with a bunch of friends?
Yeah.
Or yeah.
Yeah, I started that with my brother and my friend Dimitri. Yep.
Right. And then, so how did you get that off the ground? Because you were in the music industry. Yes, of course, you
Yeah.
got the music clients, but I'd say that they're a mix of like well paid and like helping
Yeah.
a maid out kind of thing. How did
Right, right.
how did you start like hauling in the larger clients? What sort of thinking had to
Yeah.
shift? Because when you're working uh, in the music industry, there are similarities, but it's also two different industries. So, what are some
Yeah.
things that you had to shift your thinking around?
Yeah, so when we started, we were our band was signed to the label called Tooth and Nail Records, and we went to the owner and we said, "Hey, we're starting this design company. What if we did like a retainer type thing where we did a bunch of your albums for really cheap to help us get us on our feet?" And he said yes after we twisted his arm a little bit, and that was, I mean, that was everything. I mean, we put out a book a couple years ago about our life in the music industry in regards to design, and we had him write the foreword because he was just so instrumental in our career. And so we kind of jumped in head first on just doing a bunch of albums, and the bands were popular. And so we, off the bat, got the word out that, this is like who we are, and we work with these bands. And um, it was awesome. And so what happened with the segue between music and larger clients really started with the gig poster explosion, which was like, 2000 to 2005, which
Yeah,
was, silk screen gig
yeah.
posters. And so we got really into that and did hundreds. And that is kind of how bigger clients started seeing our work. From an illustration standpoint. And posters are fun because there's a lot of freedom.
Yeah.
A lot of times we're not even working with the band, we're just working with the promoter. And so we can kind of do whatever we want. Um, Around the same time in the early 2000s, I did an interview with a website, a design site called Grain Edit. And at the time, that was like the design site for kind of like mid-century modern inspired illustration and design, and that really got a lot of eyeballs on my work. And so I was super thankful for that. So kind of like those two things I would say are were big moments in, someone like Target or Nike or something like that seeing our work, because it was just so music centric for so long.
And then, once you started attracting those clients, what was it like navigating the business side of things? Because, I mean, it's one thing to
Yeah.
have like the promoters that you're working with and, the label, he was a friend, you worked together before,
Right.
so there was a relationship. Now there's these large corporates who don't necessarily have a one-to-one relationship with you, and
Right.
maybe they have huge expectation because
Yeah.
they've seen your stuff on these websites and it's everywhere.
Totally.
So, what was it like navigating that? And what lessons did you learn through that process?
Yeah, great question. Honestly, I didn't know, what I didn't know, and I didn't know how to bid projects. I didn't know anything about usage.
Yeah,
With music, at least when we were doing it, it's like the budgets aren't great and they own everything. So I was so used to that. So when someone like Target or something comes up, or one of the first Nike things we did was like this huge, just it environments for stores basically, and we were like, whoa, like we've never done this and didn't know how to bid it. And so I reached out to people in the industry that had done it, and that had no that know knew what they were doing. Not everyone was like willing to share, and some
yeah,
people were, and the people that were willing to share were like super helpful, and I was very thankful. And so they kind of gave me the rundown and sent me like, you know, proposals that they had created and showed usage and everything. And so I I always say that I'm standing on the shoulders of giants in that regard. There's a lot of people that have helped us along the way, and I really try to pass that on as well. And so there's a lot of like, questions when you get to work with these larger these companies. And I think it's important that that folks that have done it can lend a helping hand. I think I'm just super grateful for that. So yeah, man, I didn't know anything, and I was able to kind of figure out what things are worth over time in regards to advertising. And yeah, so 24 years later, we're still rocking and having a blast. But and I think I figured out the game in regards to pricing, but that also ebbs and flows with the economy and all that kind of
yeah.
stuff. So
And uh, seeing as you were starting out and obviously you were learning on the fly, um, there must have been some failures along the way, right? So
oh
what
yeah,
what is
yeah.
what has been your relationship with failure? How do you deal with it? A lot of artists, find it really hard, uh, but you've been on both ends, being an artist and also working with corporate clients. So what was that like for you? How did you figure out how to push past that?
Yeah. It, we failed a lot. And as you get older, you try to mitigate risk and you try to fail way less because I've got a mortgage and a family and things like that. So you really try to, um, I think in some regards, when it comes to like releasing our own products, like we've done for years, I try to be as smart as possible and try to, I don't want stuff sitting on the shelf forever. I want stuff to move. And so it's really kind of like navigating our audience and who's gonna, how many can we sell of one thing. And so like there's many failures. I think like in the beginning we had an ego and we felt like we knew better than the band in many regards.
Yeah.
And that wasn't always the case, but there was some times where it's like, we'd work with a band and they're like, well, we want to use our old logo on your cover. And their old logo sucks. And we would just tell them like, we don't want to use your old logo, from the last record. And they're like, why? And we would kind of like, we try to, use big design words and kind of try to twist their arm into changing. And I think like that was just us being young and naive. And now there's just greater hills to die on. That's just
Yeah.
it's with music it's tricky because you've got a group of people putting out art, and then you come along and put a face to the art. And so it is a dance. Another thing is just you know money and business stuff. I think like for any of us who got into the arts, we didn't get into it to work in Excel and try to figure out budgets and all that stuff. So getting help on that front has been super important, so I can just focus on being creative. Um, Communication with the client, that's something that we've learned. I Every step of the way, we have a Zoom call. We talk about the project. I go into my process. We show them previous sketches to final, so like exactly kind of like how our sketch process works
Hmm.
before we even work with them. That way they're not kind of like startled by how crappy our sketches are. Like here, um,
Yeah.
so there's that. And just, before we get too far on a project, I like to show, where we're at. So yeah, there's just all these things that we failed at in the past that I'm consistently trying to get better at. Um, doesn't mean I always pull it off, but I'm definitely like, like I said, trying to mitigate any issues that I can see, going forward. Especially, we've been doing this for so long. I feel like, you know, I should know what I'm doing at this point. So yeah,
Yeah. So from what I'm hearing, if I were to sum it up, it would be number one, don't be too precious about your work.
yeah,
Uh, Number two, learn
yeah.
to delegate. You don't have to do everything. Find the right
Hmm.
person for the right job, and then you can do the creative stuff. And three,
Yeah,
most importantly, is communicate and clarifying expectations, especially with client meetings. It's super important to ensure that you both understand what the expectation is at what stage. And the
yeah,
clearer we can be about that, the easier your run with that client is going to be, and both of you walk away happy.
for sure. Yeah, absolutely. Just you nailed it. Yeah.
You had mentioned egos, and I was wondering, because you work with your brother, and I have two brothers myself, so I
Okay.
know
Yeah.
sometimes we can bash heads. So I was wondering,
Yeah.
like, have you ever had issues about like, because it's a tight knit small studio. There's only two of you.
Yeah.
Who takes lead on certain projects? Do you delegate specific tasks, specific roles? Do you fight about the aesthetics? How do you ensure that
Yeah. Yeah.
you both are working seamlessly?
Yeah. Totally. No, it's a good question. We're so different that it actually works to our benefit. Uh, I'm more like type A freak out guy, and he's like very reserved. He's much more reserved and kind of like level headed, which is awesome. So we really like work together well. Um, he's also really focused on music these days. So, he's in a band, he's in the band we just talked about. So he spends a lot of his time writing and recording. And so if something comes in through Invisible Creature, I'm usually the one that's going to take it on. If it's something that I feel like he would, anything music that comes in, I have him do it. And he gets a lot of music clients on his own. So we talk a lot throughout the day, but we don't work super close together. And I think like that's been a benefit. And we don't really tag team stuff. Sometimes we do, but usually we kind of own our own projects. Um, so yeah, it's worked out like really well. He was the in-house designer at our record label, Tooth and Nail, for 12 years or something like that. So he had a full-time gig while he was part of this as well for a long time. So and then I had gone out essentially on my own in 2000 to start, pursuing this as a glorified freelancer. So yeah, it's a weird and windy road, like, way of working, but it totally works for us.
Nice. Yeah, it's great. It's always nice when family can work together without
Yeah, totally.
egos
I know.
getting in the
Totally.
way. and
Yeah, dude.
but
Yeah.
I was wondering, with your transition then from Asterix to Invisible Creatures, what made you decide to make that switch? Um, and then what shifted between Asterix and Invisible Creatures?
Yeah, so my business partner and friend, and we're still really good friends. Asterisk was essentially going down two roads. We were, design and packaging for music, and then uh, Dimitri's side was all web. And so, I mean, if you can believe it, we were doing websites for bands before MySpace. We did a lot of websites, and we would do album websites. And it was a thing. I would do the
Yeah.
record, he would do the album website, and um, it got to the point where it was just the company was splitting in two different directions. It was like web and print. And so and they were kind of the website, Dimitri kind of his part of the company, like we had a few employees, they were getting larger web jobs like Nintendo and Microsoft, and we were still kind of working in, punk rock and
Yeah.
stuff like that. So we mutually just decided to split it off. And Invisible Creature was essentially like, hey, what if there were no rules on what we wanted to do? What if we wanted to like make a chair someday? We didn't want to, we want to be somewhat ambiguous. We loved, like universal monsters and just like skateboard creatures and stuff like that. And so we just like came up with a mascot and like really wanted to, potentially make toys one day and just basically like no rules. It's called Invisible Creature, and people can go like, "What's that?" And then figure it out on their own, or just ask someone. But um, yeah, that was the inception of IC, is really like, okay, brand new thing. There's no rules. We have a mascot, and we can use that mascot however. Um, so yeah, it ended up being like a really, we were freaked out. I didn't know if we would get any work once we split off, and um, my expectations were exceeded. Like it's just like it went really well. So
What do you think that switch to a more niched approach, in the sense of now you are focused more on illustration and design versus like
mhm.
webs stuff, did that um do you feel like you were able to corner a market better and brand yourself better because of that niching aspect?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. We were able to kind of, especially with like, we were just having fun. I mean, we had the little mummy mascot, and we were kind of like, the we didn't we felt like we weren't held back, like we could just like do whatever we want. So we started making objects and merch and things like that. And people knew us as the Clark brothers, and it was like this thing, it was more of something to grab onto, as opposed to like these guys do albums and they also do like websites for Nintendo. It felt more like, yeah, we had kind of created a little um you know corner of the room, so to speak, for ourselves. And so yeah, and I think people like could uh they could kind of get behind that, and they had known our history with music and things like that. So yeah, it was it was a good move. Looking back, it was like the right move for us.
It's interesting. It's almost like you hacked the system because everybody gets told, you need to niche. And so you did, but you didn't niche. So you created a personal brand that was the
Yeah,
niche and then did
yeah,
everything possible under the sun with that personal brand. And so it became a
yeah,
story around the creature rather than what the creature could produce. Or at least
for
that's my
sure. Yeah,
observation from the outside.
yeah, totally. I mean, that's a good way of putting it. I mean, I picture like in 20 years after I don't know when I'm going to retire, but I would love to sit back and see like all these different mummies that we made that are different sizes and proportions, and it's on stuff. And that really like is uh, it's a metaphor for like how many types of projects we worked on, whether it's, giant murals or toys or stamps or, whatever, advertising. Like it is, it's been such a cool ride because we never know who's going to call. We we're still being like, surprised with who's calling, and just really cool jobs at 24 years in. And yeah, dude, it's been such a blessing. And we don't take it for granted at all. There's all, our culture's shifting and things are changing with AI and all this stuff. And I feel like,
Yeah.
a lot of people feel like the sky is falling. I feel like um in some some art careers, it doesn't look great, but I also think that
Yeah.
it's just a tool that I think that humans can use. And I think that,
Yeah.
you know, um, yeah, not to go on a tangent, but yeah, I feel pretty positive and optimistic actually.
Yeah. Yeah, I think with AI, it's like with every evolution of technology, you see a shift in the visual
Yeah.
language, in
Hmm.
who's hired to do things. So like if you think about like when painters were making portraits, they were it until
Right.
photography came
Right.
along and kicked
Yep.
their butts. And then a bunch of painters didn't have like portrait jobs for a while, but then it recycled itself because photography was so accessible that everybody could do it.
Yes.
And then portraiture became something extremely special. And then the same evolution with, graphic design and fine art versus
Hmm.
digital art and that revolution.
Hmm.
So I feel like this is the next revolution. And then there's going to be moments where it feels like that's the only thing being used. But I
Yes.
feel like it'll just recycle because people will be like, oh, it's the market saturated with the similar kind of stuff.
Yeah.
We want something that more human, more, like messy
Yeah.
and
Yeah. I mean, I
authentic.
remember yeah, in 99, 2000, it was like print is dead, the web is here,
Yeah,
there's going to be no more books, and I feel like it's similar to now. I feel that same thing. And you're right. And ultimately, I really believe this to be true. I think I'm betting everything on the fact that people want to work with people, and
yeah,
I think in AI, those are all just tools. And I think ultimately we're going to want a soul behind the art. And I've
yeah.
talked to lots of friends that work at large companies, and that's kind of what people are saying. Like, yeah, it's fine, it's great, it's a great tool, but we want to work with people. So, yeah, I'm hoping that's the case.
Yeah, fingers crossed.
Yeah,
um,
exactly. A robot comes in right now. Yeah.
so I want I wonder for yourself, have you ever faced a sense of imposter syndrome because you went from, like working with small time brands, small bands, then going into working with massive corporates like Google and Lego and Nike and all the rest of them, uh, Fortune 500 companies. Did you ever
Yeah, yeah.
face that imposter syndrome? What was it like for you? Dealing with that.
Yeah, it's it's a nonstop uh thing that I have. And I think so. Imposter syndrome is just something that I think all great artists have, and they should have. And that's what I feel like, that's where the magic is. And I know it sounds weird, but the idea that um I'm never going to quite figure this out and I don't belong here, I think that is where the secret is. And so I really try to put myself in a place of gratitude,
Hmm.
um, in regards to what I get to do for a living and who's calling and this coming in and these people that are buying this. I'm just super thankful, and I really, I really try to put myself in that 17-year-old kid, skateboarding in my neighborhood, of just like, oh, I would love to make a life in the arts, like
Hmm.
I so I think imposter syndrome it goes hand in hand with that idea of being grateful. And I never want to lose imposter syndrome. I don't want to ever feel like I've arrived, or you know, if you think you've reached the top of the mountain, you're going to kind of spend the rest of your life trying to push people off the top, so you can stay there. And
Yeah,
I've never wanted to live like that. I've always wanted to be like, hey man, I'm just thankful to be invited to the party. Like, just,
true.
um, so yeah, man, that's always been kind of my approach. I'm honestly, like, I'm 48 now. I started Asterisk 24 years ago, and when I come to work, I'm just as stoked as I was back then. So yeah, it's I think that's super healthy, and just like a longevity is realizing really what's important and also not taking yourself too seriously.
Yeah,
Designers aren't saving the world. We're not saving the world. We're making pretty pictures, um, and we get paid to do it. And so that's just, that's kind of where I see it. Try to put it in context.
true, true. And I like the idea of, the fact that if you're on top of the mountain, you've got to the place of comfort. And if
Right.
you're so comfortable being comfortable, I feel like that leads to stagnation, because now
Yeah,
you're
for
on the
sure.
top, and there's
Right.
nothing to push you forward to the next evolution of your art, the next rendition of your skills, and like what you could
Right.
possibly do. And I feel like creatives live in this interesting bubble or space of like really finding comfort in the discomfort, like just
Hmm.
comfortable enough that you're not like killing yourself, but
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
uncomfortable enough that you need to keep pushing yourself.
Yeah, for sure, dude. Yeah, I feel that for sure. Yeah. And it really is all about the journey, right? I mean, like,
Mhm.
I collect vintage objects and toys, and like my favorite part is the journey of, looking for the thing, and then, finding it. And then when you get it, you're like, okay, cool. You put it on your shelf and it's like, okay, it's over. So like if you look at your career kind of like that, and you hear like people say enjoy the process, and I that's important. I think like there's a lot of times I don't enjoy the process. I just want to like get
Yeah,
it done, and I want to get it published or whatever. But um I think it is important to just like be content with the journey and not trying to reach the top of no one's going to reach the top, man. And like we know the stories of the people that have reached the top, but there's nothing up there.
yeah.
So like the idea of just staying, it's Steve Jobs, man. It's stay young, stay foolish, or whatever. Like
Yeah,
that's a real thing. Yeah.
yeah. And moving from that place of comfort to discomfort, you switched from, well, not switched, but you've more recently taken on children's book projects. One of the biggest I've ever seen, the biggest storybook
Mhm.
ever
Oh
told.
yeah.
It's a stunning project. My kids absolutely love it. Read that book to
Awesome.
them every day. And
Oh, nice.
what
Thank you.
was what was that like, transitioning into sort of almost a different industry? I feel like children's books is its own thing. Um,
Hmm.
and the scale of that project, what was that like for you?
Man, I was so scared to start it because I didn't even know where to begin. I took
Yeah.
on I had done a smaller I had done a smaller children's storybook Bible that was it wasn't small. I mean, looking back, my first book was 140 pages, but in compared to the actual Bible that I did, like, yeah, I there's a couple things that happened. I didn't want to, and I don't think artists want to do this ever, is repeat themselves. And so I didn't want, this was like supposed to be in the same vein as the previous book. Um, and it was hard for me to go back there because I'm never one to kind of like revisit an old thing, something that is I've already done. So I didn't know where to start, and I wanted to be excited about it and really just like live in that world, and I wasn't getting there. It was like I don't think I started on it until 2 years after I had the contract. I just pushed it off for so long, and then the publisher was like, "We got to put this out, dude." Um, and it was right around when COVID hit, and so it was actually kind of like perfect timing. But
Yeah.
um, yeah, I just got in the mindset of like, okay, let's use the same color palette. Let's riff off of the same style. Let's only use the same brushes, but let's really push it where like it's exactly what you want it to be. It's heavily stylized, and just like go for it. And so with that specific book, I just every day I'd come to the studio, I'd read what the author had written, and I would just sit there and look at the page and just like okay, what should this be? I really tried to juxtapose the pages between like highly conceptual and more, yeah, I'm using realistic and,
Yeah.
quotes because there's nothing realistic in there, but, trying to tell the story in a way that the truth of it is there, but it's obviously it looks different. So yeah, I just like, what does this page need essentially? I know that sounds weird, but
Mm,
like it really was that. And then I would just, I didn't turn in a single sketch for the project. I just like sat down, worked on the page, finished it and moved on. And um it's funny, by the time I got to like the New Testament, there was so much old stuff that I was like, it doesn't look as good as like how, because I was so in the zone.
yeah, yeah,
And so I went back and I redid like a ton of the Old Testament. And um yeah, dude, it was when I was in it, it was amazing because it was just I didn't know where it was coming from. Oh, I knew where it was coming from. I'm a believer as well, but like I was
yeah,
like, man, I'm just so in the zone. And I just like prayed that people would be into it. I'm like,
yeah,
I finished this thing. I worked on it by myself for 2 years. The publisher loved it, but you just didn't know how it would like how the audience would react. And yeah, dude, it's been such a blessing. It's been like in the top 500 on Amazon for 2 years, and I'm just super thankful. Um, and we're working on more stuff. I have more. I just signed on to do two more books in that world. So yeah,
wow.
it's been an awesome blessing. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a stunning piece of work. That's all I can say, and the kids
Thank
enjoy
you,
it.
dude.
So,
Thank you. Thank you, man. Thank you.
and so I'm curious, what's next for you? I mean, what's tickling your fancy? You've gone through so many different renditions of invisible creatures. You've done furniture and toys, and now children's books. So what's pushing you?
Yeah, thanks, dude. I'm just, thankful to keep getting work in design from clients on kind of like personal note. Like basically, you know, we've always made a priority of like releasing our own products and things like that. Just it keeps us excited about making new stuff and pushes us. So we do. I can't get too much into it now, but we have like a really cool thing we're working on. That's a whole product line that probably won't be out till next year, but that's something we're working on. Working on a film project with some friends that could take years to get into development, but um, super excited about that. I started a new band with my son.
Oh,
So
cool.
we're putting out a record next year. Um, it's funny. I left the band when my son was 2, and now he's 18, and he's a ripper on guitar. And so we formed a band. And so anyways, I'm having a blast, dude. I'm kind of dipping my toes in different avenues of art and working with some super talented people and just kind of trying to see what else is out there.
Yeah, that's awesome. You had spoken about being a believer, and I was curious what role faith has with art and how that has affected your journey.
Yeah, well, as a Christian, it's you know, my faith is it involves everything I do. So it's not something that like sits on the shelf or whatever. It informs everything I do, and I feel like um, my creating great work or trying to create great work is to me worship. And it's I feel like it's a way that I can show gratitude to my creator and make the best stuff as possible. And yeah, it informs everything, so it's obviously I was very lucky to work on the Bible project. That was very special to me. But every single day is I kind of look at every project that comes in as like a blessing and something that's informed. You know, uh, yeah, Yeah, it affects every aspect of life.
Yeah, I know what you mean because for me it was like the whole purpose and style and language around all the illustrative work I do is about bringing joy and encouragement, and I got that purpose when
Hmm.
I, like prayerfully asked God, what do you want me to do with this work? The
Yes. Yeah.
skills, the talents that have been given to me, how do I invest
Yes.
them? And this was one way of, taking what was given and delighting and sharing worship in
Yeah.
our abilities.
I love that, man. I love that. Yeah. I I couldn't agree more. And yeah, just so thankful to be doing what I'm doing. And yeah, all glory to the King, man. I'm a I my dad was a pastor, and I've walked some windy roads in my own life, but
Yeah,
you know, became a believer on my own, early
yeah,
on in junior high. And so yeah.
yeah. I'm not that far off myself. My dad was a missionary
Nice,
doctor,
dude. Oh, really?
and then,
Nice.
of
So
course, grew up.
you're just as messed up as I am then, if your dad
Yeah,
was a Oh man, that's cool.
and my wife's a PK as well. So,
Oh wow, dude, that's amazing.
yeah.
So your dad was a missionary in India?
Yeah, so where I am Indian, I grew up there. My dad is a missionary doctor for a, co- a company called Emmanuel Hospital Association, and what they do is they
Okay.
go into rural India where there's no infrastructure and health, and they develop community health and hospitals. And so my dad was a part of
Wow.
uh, that, going out providing healthcare for all these people, and of course faith plays a big role in that.
Yeah,
He
dude,
did
amazing.
something super unconventional in the sense that most doctors get paid really well, and he chose to go to community health.
Yeah, dude. What a guy, what a dude, man. I love that, man. What you have an awesome dad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So to kind of pull this interview to an end, the last question second last question I'd like to ask you is, what is one piece of advice you would give the next generation?
Mm, yeah, I think my answer could just go all over the place. I would say that head down, hard work is a huge part of it, and not caring at all about any kind of social media presence or fame or any of that stuff, and just figure out what you love about art and do that and find out where it came from and who came before you and fall in love with it. And there's a lot of times we get asked, like we'll be speaking at a conference or something, and someone will come up, or they'll say like, I like art, but I don't know where to start for a career. And I'm always like shocked by that question, because I feel like it almost might be too late for that person. For my brother and I, we got obsessed with skateboarding and albums and music, and went to every show, and like, you know, watched Star Wars like crazy. Like there was no one, we didn't need to go ask like what we were into. We just like
Yeah,
it, we were, so like, I think that's a huge part of it. I think some of the best artists in the world are just, you know, obsessed, I think, hopefully in a healthy way, on what they want to do. Like you hear about like J.J. Abrams writing letters to Steven Spielberg. It's like that,
yeah,
like you you have to put the work in, um, and find a way. And if you're persistent and you're good and you put in the time, like you can be unstoppable and pursue the dream that you have. I think that when you get sidetracked on how many followers am I going to have or whatever, or like whatever cultural moment is popular, like that kind of stuff can sidetrack and derail you. I think it's just a matter of working hard, put your head down. Don't take yourself too seriously. Again, we're not like saving the world here. We're pursuing our dreams as, artists. Uh, and just surrounding yourself with like-minded people that can really like, that was a big thing for us, is that we found friends that were just like us and hungry and wanted to do it. And, we were a little crew of just, pursuing this life. And, whether that's going to shows, concerts, or going to design conferences, and meeting like-minded folks to really like walk that journey with you is huge. And
Mm,
yeah, I guess that's kind of my answer.
yeah, I love that. I love that. I totally agree because I feel like all creatives are kind of addicts, and
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
our addiction is a healthy one at the moment.
Yeah. Yeah,
Our
exactly.
our personalities are such that if we're pushed the wrong direction, it could easily go unhealthy. And so I
You're
think
right,
art
dude.
is
You're
almost
right.
like the savior for us to keep us in
Yes.
the right relationship with things. Um, and
Yes. Yeah. And then having family, like my wife and my kids just totally keep me grounded and keep me on
yeah,
the right path, and like, obviously my faith. But yeah, you know, you bring up, yeah, that's a great point. Just like funnel it into something that's healthy, as opposed to like, that's all you live for is,
yeah,
your life as a designer or something. So
yeah. And the second thing is, of course, community. Like you said, it's so
right.
important for creatives to have community because I think
Yep.
uh, like Simon, well, the opposite of Simon and Garfunkel, you can't be an island on
Hmm.
your own because you need the
Yeah.
community to push
Yes.
you.
No.
You need that like creative, area to like be inspired by other people so that you can push
Yeah.
yourself, and then in that you push them, and it's a safe place to grow.
Yes. 100%. 100%. Yeah. I think you should definitely, you should look at your friends and the people that are in that same community with you doing what you're doing as like really healthy competition. And it just makes you want to be a better artist.
100%. And the last question I like to ask all my guests is, what does the word fruitful mean to you?
Oh man, fruitful. Good word. We use it a lot in our family. Are you being fruitful with that? Yeah. Yeah, I feel like it goes hand in hand with stewarding. Like I
Mm,
feel like stewarding what you've been given well. I think that's a one way to use it. Um, yeah, fruitful. I guess like if you boil it down, like I feel like, are you are you grateful? I don't know, I'm just putting this into my like, is it helping? Is it helping someone else? Is it helping you? Are you using gratitude to um not only affect your life and your day, but other people's as well? Uh, um, yeah, 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 good question. Am I stewarding the gifts that I've been given in a positive way?
that's a great answer. Thank you. And hey,
Yeah.
and hey, thank you all for listening to this episode of The Fruitful Life. I hope you walked away with some nuggets of wisdom. If you did, please do me a favor and leave a rating and a comment to tell me about what you think of the show. Also, consider telling a friend that might like it. As always, be true, be you, stay fruitful.